Great news, VDM has been released and we are all happy about that. Happy about that development. He was released after days of pressure from people, from his supporters, from Nigerians who felt that the process by which he was picked up and the manner in which they went about it was unfair and was unjust. And they demanded for his release. And finally, he has been released. But think of others who were picked up in similar circumstances, who don't have that level of support, who don't have people to speak up for them, who don't have influential members of the society to speak up for them. And they remain locked up in custody or in prison for the offenses they commit. If they were charged to court, they will not spend as much time in prison for that offense. But they are locked up because somebody who had influence, who had power, locked them up. And it speaks to the mentality of Nigerians, where if anyone have any level of influence or power or connection and is offended by something, offended by what somebody said, little issues, it picks them up and keep them in prison. You hear cases of, somebody was working in a shop and something gets missing and everybody is picked up. Even those that are remotely connected to the case, they are picked up and they are locked up and remain locked up because the person that picked them up has influence. Now, we as a society need to think about this. How can we have a culture change or reset of our mindset that any little issue, somebody is picked up and locked up? Imagine many young men and young women who have been picked up because they happen to be working in the place or they happen to be passing by or they just happen to be involved in an issue and they are picked up and they remain locked up with no one to speak for them. So why can't we ask ourselves this question? If you that is listening or watching this, think about it. If you decide that if you have an issue, instead of going to the police, instead of picking up and locking people up, you seek alternative dispute resolution. That everything doesn't have to end up with the police. Everything doesn't have to end up in somebody being in custody. Because we end up corrupting the society. If we are using the police, because they say civil disputes are not supposed to be under the police. So if we are using the police to get involved in issues that shouldn't involve them, we are corrupting the system. And tomorrow, we may find ourselves in a situation, somebody higher up than us will pick us up. And we won't have much to complain because we've done that to someone that is lower than us. So, please, as a society, we should work towards changing that mindset of locking up people and not corrupting the system. If you notice, right, like, look at, if you watch these foreign films, like crime scene investigation, CSI films, you find out that when a crime is committed, right, they do a lot of investigations, they get fingerprints, DNA, and all of that. They gather all this evidence. Even before the person is picked up, they've already gathered the evidence. That when the person is picked up, they will ask you question, and if you think that you are smart, they will provide evidence. At the end of the day, the person confesses because he's confronted with an abundance of evidence. But in Nigeria, our police is underfunded. They don't have those tools. They don't have those equipment, say maybe in the headquarters or their main command in the states. They don't have those facilities. They don't have those training. So when a crime is committed, except the person is caught red-handed and there are witnesses to that event, and those witnesses can testify that that person committed that crime, except in that situation, that is when you have cut and dry case in Nigeria. But if there is no clear evidence, if nobody was caught red-handed, right, and it's just an allegation that something is missing or something happened to somebody and there is no clear-cut evidence, police, if the police is involved, what do? They use intimidation to beat up those people that have been arrested. Even if they are not even connected to the case, they beat them up until they confess to doing it. Because they don't have other investigative tools to use to gather evidence, they rely on beating up people, intimidation, and all that. If the police were better funded, if they have the tools and equipment, right, they won't resort to just intimidation. Because if you look at it, some of the things they do is intimidation. They just intimidate you. At the end of the day, some people that don't have the willpower or don't have the means and all that, some people confess to doing things that they shouldn't have been involved, that they weren't involved in, simply because they didn't have any guidance, nobody to help them, and they feel that, if I confess to doing this thing, maybe I'll get off. And they end up spending years in prison for offenses that they didn't even commit. So, if we can have a change of mindset, and if the government, instead of wasting resources in things that are not necessary, would adequately fund the police and ensure there is proper recruitment and training of the police and security agencies, so that they don't resort to these Gestapo tactics of catching people, more like a kidnap and all that, and force them to stay in isolated place or in unsanitary conditions, and some endure all forms of humiliation to the point that they have to confess to doing something that they did not do. So, there are lessons that we all have to learn. If me as an individual can say, okay, if there is an issue and it's a civil matter that doesn't need to involve the police, seek alternative dispute resolution. We have people in our community that are community heads. We have in our villages, village heads. We have traditional rulers. We have community leaders that can be involved in certain matters that doesn't necessarily have to be the police. And at the end of the day, you have even better resolution than when somebody is merely locked up in prison. The person is locked up, and if, let's say, the person even stole something from you, which is wrong, by the way, but let's say the person stole something from you and the person is locked up in prison, how would the person work to get the money to pay? Some people are in prison because they don't have money to pay for the fine or pay for what they've been accused of collecting or stealing. So these, I think are some of the things we can learn from this episode.